Beyond the Gates spoilers teased that Donnell was left shaken to his core when Randy, with a voice that trembled between guilt and revelation, disclosed the haunting news about Doug before he drew his final breath. The revelation was not only a blow to Donnell's heart but also a fracture in the fragile reality he had been clinging to since returning. Randy's words landed like daggers, tearing open memories Donnell had worked hard to repress. The weight of Doug's downfall, the spiral into shadows that Donnell had never imagined possible for his brother, pressed down on him with unbearable force. Their encounter was not an accident but a collision of desperation and secrets, staged under the harsh neon lights of Joey's casino. The room was filled with the hypnotic whirl of slot machines and the soft thunder of dice across green velvet, but beneath that surface glitter was the stench of corruption. Donnell had gone there seeking nothing more than clarity, but what he found instead was Randy hollow-eyed, worn down, and tethered to a man whose empire was built on broken lives. The two men exchanged words over a quiet corner table, away from Joey's prying gaze. Randy spoke of Doug's demise with the bitterness of someone who had seen too much, someone who had crossed lines that could never be uncrossed. Donnell listened, barely believing the image of Doug that Donnell carried in his heart, brother full of fire, laughter, and reckless ambition, clashed with the broken reality Randy laid bare. How had it come to this? How had Doug slipped so far? Donnell's disbelief boiled into anger, not directed at Randy but at the silence of his own family. He accused his mother of betrayal through omission, of choosing to shield him from the truth instead of giving him a chance to intervene. If I had known, I could have pulled him back. I could have saved him from himself. His words were heavy with grief, yet beneath them was a desperate yearning for absolution. He wanted to believe there was still something he could have done. But Randy's eyes told him otherwise. "Donnell," he muttered, "you don't know how deep it went." By the time you came back, Doug was already gone. Maybe not dead, but gone inside. Randy's voice cracked when he spoke Doug's name, and Donnell saw for the first time the depth of torment etched into the man's soul. Donnell then revealed something he had kept close to his chest. His parents had concealed more than just Doug's downfall. While Donnell was away, changes had swept through their family like a silent plague, and every sign of decay had been deliberately hidden from him. It was as though the house he had grown up in had chosen to swallow its own rot to protect him or to keep him blind. Suspicion grew like a venomous weed in Randy's mind. He voiced aloud what Donnell dared not say, that Vanessa, Doug's widow, may have been weaving her own web of lies. "What if she's hiding something?" Randy asked in a hushed tone. "What if she's tied to his death in ways none of us want to believe?" The idea was chilling, but it lodged itself into Donnell's mind like a shard of glass. Vanessa had always seemed composed, too composed, and perhaps beneath that exterior there lurked complicity. Yet Randy's predicament ran deeper than suspicion. He was a man trapped in a labyrinth designed by Joey, the casino's ruthless mastermind. Having returned to work under Joey's command, Randy was forced into a delicate balancing act: appear loyal, avoid questions, and never once let his true thoughts slip. One misstep, and Joey's gaze would fall on him with deadly intent. That precarious balance began to crumble the day Randy lingered too close to Joey's office door. Through the sliver of wood, he overheard a conversation that twisted his stomach into knots. Joey and Bill, speaking in hushed but sharp tones, mentioned Doug by name. Randy froze, his pulse hammering in his ears as fragments of their words painted a horrifying picture. Doug had gone to Bill for help, desperate, clinging to the hope that an old associate might throw him a lifeline. But instead of salvation, Doug had been delivered to betrayal. Bill, it seemed, had turned him over to Joey, and soon after, Doug's life was extinguished. The realization was like a match striking gasoline. Randy understood in that moment that Doug's death had not been a simple accident, not a random fall from grace, but a calculated execution. Worse still, the betrayal came from within his circle, from Bill, who had once been seen as a brother. The knowledge burned in Randy's chest, and along with it came terror. If Bill had betrayed Doug, then Randy was no safer. If Bill discovered Randy's covert doubts, or his wandering loyalties, then Randy would be next. Fear became Randy's shadow, following him through every corridor of Joey's casino. The paranoia gnawed at his mind, whispering that every glance might be suspicion, every smile a mask for murder. He knew he had to act, but action in Joey's world was fraught with danger. There was no easy exit. To flee blindly would be suicide, but to stay silent would be slow death. So Randy devised a desperate gambit, a secret phone call. Cloaked in darkness, he slipped into a back room, his hands trembling as he dialed. The question, however, loomed over every heartbeat. Who was he calling? The name Jacob surfaced in his thoughts, a man outside Joey's direct sphere of influence, a potential ally. If he could confide in Jacob, lay bare Joey's crimes and Bill's treachery, perhaps there would be a way to bring the empire down from within. But trust was a dangerous currency, and one wrong word could end in his body being dragged from the river by morning. The call itself was a storm of whispers, heavy breaths, and half-truths. Randy spoke in fragments, weaving a tapestry of warning and confession without naming every detail outright. His voice was hoarse with urgency, weighed down by the knowledge of his own sins. Because Randy was no innocent, his hands were stained with blood spilled at Joey's command. Every murder he carried out, every life he ended, was a chain around his neck. He knew the law would not absolve him easily, yet he clung to the faint hope that confession, cooperation, and betrayal of Joey might carve a sliver of mercy from an otherwise merciless fate. The question of forgiveness lingered over him like a phantom. Would Jacob or anyone truly believe his motives? Would the authorities grant him leniency, or would they brand him irredeemable, another thug trying to save his skin at the 11th hour? These doubts tore at Randy even as he spoke into the receiver, his voice cracking with desperation. Joey himself, however, was not a man to be underestimated. Age had not dulled his instincts, but sharpened them into blades. He was cunning, a fox dressed in silk, capable of bending men and law alike to his will. Even Marcel, a police officer sworn to uphold justice, was caught in Joey's orbit, swayed by his wealth, his reach, or perhaps by darker debts that kept him bound. Joey's influence stretched so far that even the institutions meant to destroy him became his shield. Bill, meanwhile, was unraveling under his own fear. He had thought himself clever, selling Doug out to Joey, ensuring his own survival for another day. But guilt and paranoia gnawed at him now. He could feel Joey's eyes on him, calculating, weighing whether Bill too might become disposable once Doug's death came under scrutiny. Bill lived in a constant state of dread, waiting for the axe to fall. Every deal he made, every word he spoke, he imagined Joey turning it against him. Bill knew the truth. In Joey's world, loyalty was a leash, and the moment it loosened, the dog was put down. The air in the casino thickened with tension, invisible but suffocating. Randy's secret call had set forces in motion that could not be undone. Donnell's thirst for answers was driving him deeper into shadows he did not yet understand. Vanessa's silence hung over the family like a storm cloud, daring someone to pierce it. And Joey, the puppeteer, unaware or perhaps all too aware that the threads of his empire were fraying beneath the surface. Every player in this deadly game carried secrets, and every secret was a fuse waiting to ignite. Donnell found himself trapped in a spiral of questions he was not ready to answer. Randy had planted seeds of doubt that grew restless inside him, doubts about his mother, about Vanessa, and about the truth behind Doug's final hours. Yet suspicion alone was poison, and Donnell knew that if he moved too soon, he would lose the only chance at uncovering what had been carefully buried. Vanessa became a figure impossible to ignore. Her cold composure drew sharper scrutiny with every passing day. To outsiders, she was grieving a widow clutching at the remnants of a broken life. But to Donnell, she was too calm, too deliberate, as though she were rehearsing every gesture of sorrow. He recalled the nights Doug had confided his frustrations with her, the whispers of distance that had begun to stretch their marriage thin. And now, in the echo of Doug's death, Vanessa's silence seemed less like grief and more like calculation. The question gnawed at him: had she simply accepted her husband's collapse, or had she played a hand in ensuring it? Randy, meanwhile, moved with the jittery rhythm of a man living on borrowed time. His secret phone call weighed on him, a mixture of hope and dread. If Jacob had heard him, believed him, then a chain reaction might soon follow. But Joey's eyes were everywhere. One misstep, one misheard word, and Randy would be nothing more than another ghost in the city's underworld. He knew Joey did not forgive betrayal. He crushed it swiftly, efficiently, and without ceremony. The tension between Randy and Bill thickened like storm clouds. Bill, once a man of swagger and easy charm, now staggered under the fear that Joey had already marked him. The knowledge that Randy might have overheard pieces of that deadly conversation with Joey haunted him. Bill had tried to be clever when he delivered Doug, thinking he had secured his place. Instead, he realized he had only tied himself tighter to Joey's noose. Every time he locked eyes with Randy across the casino floor, he imagined the man's silence breaking, imagined Joey turning his fury onto him, and it left Bill sleepless, twitching with paranoia. Donnell's determination to find the truth drove him deeper into Joey's empire. He returned to the casino, not to gamble, but to watch, to study. Joey's world was a kingdom of illusions. But behind every smile and every deal, Donnell saw shadows shifting. Joey was older, but his cunning had not dulled. He used Marcel, the officer, as his shield, bending law enforcement to his will. Whenever whispers of suspicion reached the surface, Marcel was there to smother them, his badge tarnished by Joey's influence. This revelation chilled Donnell. If even the police were compromised, then who could he trust? The fragile web began to tear when Randy, shaken by his own desperation, confronted Donnell again. The man's eyes were hollow, but behind him was fire of someone who had decided to gamble everything. "Donnell," he said, his voice low and jagged, "you need to understand. Joey will not stop. Bill will not stop. Doug was only the beginning. If we don't act, you're next. I'm next. Anyone who knows too much will fall." Donnell's fists clenched. He had not asked for this world, had not asked to inherit the chaos his brother had left behind. But Randy's words rang true. The danger was no longer distant, it was pressing in on all sides. The air grew more volatile when Joey himself sensed the cracks forming in his circle. His empire thrived on fear and silence. He began to test his pawn small tasks, sharp words, subtle threats to measure their loyalty. Randy felt the net closing. Bill felt the weight of suspicion. Even Marcel, shielded though he was, began to question how long Joey could keep the facade intact before the storm consumed them all. Donnell could not shake the feeling that Vanessa held a key to everything. He recalled Randy's suspicion, the lingering possibility that she was more than an innocent widow. One night, driven by equal parts anger and need, he confronted her directly. Her eyes widened, but instead of shattering under accusation, she met him with steady defiance. "You think I wanted this?" she asked bitterly. "You think I chose to be married into this madness?" Her words carried pain, but also something else in edge that unsettled Donnell. She never denied knowledge. She never denied the possibility of complicity. She only redirected the blame, leaving Donnell with more questions than answers. Meanwhile, Bill's paranoia reached its breaking point. He approached Joey with false bravado, trying to reassert his loyalty, but Joey's gaze pierced him like a blade. Joey was no fool. He knew fear when he smelled it, and Bill reeked of it. To Joey, Bill was no longer a loyal soldier but a liability, a man whose trembling hands might soon spill secrets. Bill felt the walls closing in and, in a moment of desperation, considered turning against Joey before Joey could destroy him. But hesitation was his curse. Every hour he delayed was another hour Joey tightened his grip. Randy, sensing his own time running out, pushed harder. He pressed Donnell to act with him, to take what he knew and expose Joey's empire before it devoured them both. But Donnell was torn. To act meant stepping into the same darkness that had consumed Doug. To risk his life and perhaps lose it. To stay silent meant allowing Joey to continue unchecked, condemning himself and those he loved to the same fate. The casino, once a glittering backdrop, became a battleground of secrets. Every exchange between Joey and his men, every whispered deal, every hand of cards was a move in a larger game. Donnell moved like a shadow through it, hunting for the truth of Doug's death, of Bill's betrayal, of Vanessa's silence. Randy moved with the desperation of a man one breath away from death, clutching at his last chance for redemption. Bill stumbled through it with the eyes of a hunted animal, waiting for the inevitable strike, smiling as he tested who would crack first. Marcel, bound by Joey's reach, played his own dangerous role. He kept the law at bay, but in private moments, he wrestled with the cost of his choices. Every bribe he accepted, every order he obeyed, tied him tighter to Joey's leash. And yet, beneath his controlled exterior, doubt festered. If Joey fell, Marcel knew he would fall with him. What none of them realized was that the threads of betrayal and fear were drawing together toward a single, inevitable collision. Donnell's anger, Randy's desperation, Bill's paranoia, Vanessa's guarded secrets, Joey's manipulations, and Marcel's compromised badge, all of it spiraled toward an eruption. Donnell stood at the center of it, torn between family loyalty and the crushing need for justice. Randy hovered at his side, desperate to prove that confession could be a path to salvation. Bill lingered on the edge, a man crumbling under his own treachery. Vanessa's role remained obscured, her calm hiding truths that could either damn her or redeem her. Joey waited, ever cunning, watching his empire tremble but unwilling to let it collapse without a fight. And Marcel, caught between his badge and Joey's chains, hovered on the brink of choosing whether to enforce the law or betray it one final time. The stage was set for revelations that would shatter them all. What began as whispers in Joey's casino was transforming into a storm that none of them could escape, a storm that promised to drag truth, betrayal, and blood into the open. The tension that had been building in every corner of Joey's empire finally reached its breaking point. The casino, once a place of flashing lights and false promises, transformed into a crucible where every lion betrayal burned hotter with each passing night. Donnell, Randy, Bill, Vanessa, Joey, and Marcel, each of them knew that the end was no longer a distant threat. It was here, breathing down their necks, waiting for the moment when everything would collapse in fire and blood. Donnell's obsession with uncovering the truth about Doug drove him into reckless territory. He began to follow Vanessa more closely, shadowing her movements, searching for the tiniest crack in her carefully maintained mask. One night he caught her slipping into a private meeting outside the casino, far from where grieving widows should have been. What he overheard was enough to make his blood run cold. Vanessa was not just grieving, she was negotiating. Her tone was sharp, her words practiced, as though she were securing her own safety in exchange for silence. Donnell realized in that moment that Randy's suspicions had not been unfounded. Vanessa was complicit, whether in Doug's downfall or in protecting Joey's empire. He could not yet be certain, but her hands were not clean. Meanwhile, Randy's desperation escalated into action. He reached out once more to Jacob, this time with names, details, and proof. He knew he was condemning himself by confessing his role in Joey's murders, but he also believed it was the only way he could make peace with Doug's ghost. Jacob listened, hesitant but intrigued, and for the first time Randy felt a spark of hope that Joey could be brought down from the inside. Still, he could not shake the fear that Joey already knew. Every sound behind him, every footstep in the casino corridors made him flinch. Bill's downfall came swiftly. Paranoia had pushed him too far, and Joey, ever the predator, smelled weakness. In a chilling confrontation in Joey's office, Bill tried to reassert loyalty, but his words betrayed him. Joey leaned back in his chair, eyes cold, and said only, "You already told me everything I needed when you gave me Doug." In that instant, Bill knew his life was over. His body was never found, but whispers spread through the casino staff, and the fear thickened. Marcel faced his own breaking point. For years he had obeyed Joey's will, telling himself it was survival, not corruption. But when Randy's confession reached Jacob and the possibility of real exposure loomed, Marcel realized he was trapped. If Joey fell, Marcel would fall too. But if he clung to Joey, he risked going down in flames anyway. His choice was not between loyalty and betrayal, but between two different deaths, one quick and one slow. Donnell confronted Vanessa in a moment of raw fury. "Did you know?" he demanded, his voice cracking under the weight of grief and rage. Vanessa did not flinch. "I knew enough," she admitted, "enough to stay alive." Doug made his choices, Donnell. "Choices you'll never understand because you weren't here to see him break." Her words cut deep, but they carried a strange honesty. She had not killed Doug, but she had stepped aside when Joey moved against him. To her, survival was the only truth left. Donnell could barely look at her after that, torn between hatred and the faint recognition that perhaps Doug's destruction had been inevitable. The storm came on a night when the casino was at its most alive, the machines roaring, the tables packed, Joey sitting on his throne like a king surrounded by subjects. But beneath the surface, war drums were beating. Jacob's move had been set into motion, and the police toes not under Marcel's thumb were ready to strike. Randy, trembling but resolute, slipped through the shadows, waiting for the right moment to deliver the blow. Donnell stood at the edge, unsure whether he was a participant or an unwilling witness. When it happened, it was chaos. Sirens split the night, shouts erupted, and the casino's walls reverberated with panic. Joey, furious but unshaken, barked orders to his men, his age showing only in the lines on his face but not in the steel of his voice. Marcel, torn between law and loyalty, hesitated, and that hesitation sealed his fate. A single gunshot cracked, and Marcel fell, not as a martyr, not as a hero, but as a man who had tried to serve two masters and failed both. Randy, cornered in the chaos, found himself face to face with Joey. Years of servitude, of bloodshed under orders, surged through him as he leveled his trembling hand against the man who had made him into a monster. "You took Doug," Randy hissed, his voice breaking, "but you don't get to take me." For a moment, Joey's smirk faltered. The old man still tried to twist his words, to remind Randy of the lives he had destroyed in Joey's name. But the tide had turned. The gun fired, and Joey's reign ended not with grandeur, but with the simple, brutal truth of betrayal. Donnell watched it all unfold with hollow eyes. He had wanted justice for Doug, answers for his family, and an end to Joey's grip over their lives. But what he saw was only ruin. Bill was gone, Marcel was dead, Joey lay bleeding, and Randy shaking, weeping, covered in the weight of his sin. She had become both executioner and victim. Vanessa stood in the wreckage, her mask cracked but not broken, her survival instinct carrying her through even this. The aftermath left no heroes, only survivors. Randy was taken by the police, his confession sealing both his fate and Joey's empire's destruction. Whether leniency would come was uncertain, but he walked away with at least the knowledge that Joey could never command another death. Donnell returned home, carrying answers but no peace. Vanessa remained, her future uncertain, bound forever to choices she could never undo. The gates had closed on Joey's empire, but what lay beyond them was not redemption, not triumph, but the haunting realization that in a world of shadows, victory was only another form of survival.